All right. Wow, that's loud. I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 25th, 2022 regular school board meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order. We'll do a roll call of directors real quick.
Eddie Vanami, present.
Monica Strange, present.
Roger Canoy, present.
Jeremy Mask, present.
Melissa Keller, present.
All right, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Sorry. All right, I'll go ahead and review the I-35 mission statement and our district priorities. The mission statement reads, the Interstate 35 Community School District exists to develop lifelong learners and responsible, productive, successful citizens in an ever-changing society. District priorities, number 1, articulate and support a cohesive student-centered pre-K through 12 vision for continuous school improvement. Number 2, engage in effective teaching and relevant learning for the 21st century. And number 3, operate with fiscal integrity, efficiency, and effectiveness. The directors all should have received the agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda at this point.
I'd move to approve the agenda, but also moving 9A to rate before number 4. Is that accurate?
That would. So we've had a motion to approve the agenda with the amendment that 9A be moved up after the open forum.
I'll second that motion.
It's been Yep. It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The open forum. Residents, students, parents, guardians, and staff members of the district may address the board about relevant topics. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers' participation is limited to 5 minutes per meeting. We ask speakers to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees or students or their performance. Did we have any? We did not. Okay. So we will go ahead and go straight to 9A. 9A, the elementary school building goals review.
That work from down here. All right, welcome to the board meeting. So to go through our elementary building goals and accomplishments, got a little slideshow here to go through, hopefully pretty quickly. Just a summary of our BLT team. It's comprised of a handful of members of our staff. And so we kind of have kindergarten, second grade, fourth grade represented. So we have representatives across the different grades. We have the counselor and an instructional coach. We just try to get a wide array of different people on that committee. So it's myself, Mr. Tussey, the counselor, Mrs. Ritchie, Mrs. Nissen Pickard, Mrs. Sand, and Mrs. Brown. At the beginning of our year, our building goals were to have 60% of our math and reading common assessments created and recorded within PowerSchool and aligned with identified priority standards. We've been working on priority standards for a while. And then the SBG committee was formed they changed the timeline of that SBG rollout, and so we modified our goals to align with that new set of expectations, which were to priority standards for all 4 content areas and vertical alignment to make sure there's no gaps, and to work on proficiency scales, and that's what they're working on right now. So they've completed that first part. The proficiency scales will be completed in this next couple months, and we'll have finished our goals for the year. Another goal that we had for the year was some staff meetings and social events. So roundtable meeting data from the beginning of the year just showed a desire from the staff to have more in-person staff meetings and more opportunities to socialize. So working with a social committee, we combined the two. And so once a month, we have a 15-minute staff meeting followed by a social event that has games and snacks. The meeting part is within contract hours, so that is mandatory. And then the after part is optional, but it provides that both of that, a staff meeting and a social event. So we have business up front and a party in the back. So we aptly name those mullet meetings. So we have our monthly mullet meetings. We have another one coming up this Thursday. And that is you.
Hi, I'm Samantha Ritchie. I'm a BLT member and I'm also a preschool teacher. I'm going to talk to you today about daycare and preschool slides both. So starting with the daycare, they have transferred currently over to a more user-friendly program called Brightwheel that helps with communication and payments through the daycare and preschool both. It's going really well. We just rolled over that about a month ago, I'd say, maybe even less. So far so good. Currently serving 89 kids in the daycare and have 60 signed up for the summer program. Also, we've had, with our enrollment coming in for next year, with the daycare and the preschool, our wraparound just doubled in size. We are growing massively. So also the daycare received a grant and kind of made some updates with their centers and supplies and things like that. I don't know which button to click, but thank you. In preschool this year, we had a pretty big month in November. We received our accreditation. We moved from NACCE to IQPPS. And there was quite a bit of work that went into getting our accreditation. There are 21 required criteria within the 10 program standards. So we had to create a program portfolio. Our classroom, Mrs. Murphy, Ms. Dickinson, and I created our classroom portfolios as well as our students' portfolios. We also had a site visit, and they toured the building and kind of did a teacher interview as well, and we passed with flying colors, so yay. That was a big thing this fall. Also, we are currently working on a new report card for next year. Ours is just pretty basic, just reporting out on a few gold pieces and a few things that we do with our monthly assessments, but we're gonna shift more to what the kindergarten team did. We really liked what they created, and we're gonna kind of mimic that and align it with our gold that we're using currently for preschool, along with the Iowa Early Learning Standards. So we're gonna beef up things a little bit to share with parents at conference time. And then I kind of mentioned this with the daycare, our continued success and growth in the preschool program in collaboration with daycare. So, thanks.
Okay, Stephanie Brown, instructional coach, and I'm going to speak on behalf of kindergarten. And so they have 71% of their students have made benchmark, and they're working really on growth for every single student. One of the things that I'm going to jump a little bit to the new report card that she kind of talked about. They've worked really hard at the beginning of the year to give more information and communicate with families where students are, because in the younger grades you could be at a 2 or a 3 in standards-based grading for a long time and not be able to show that growth. So they wanted to make sure that they communicate that growth with families. And so now, like, if they need to know 26 letters of the alphabet, they can say, well, by the first trimester they need to know 11. By the second trimester they need to know 20 of them or whatever, and then by the end 26. So they can say where they're at those benchmarks in time. So they have gone through all of their priority standards in all 4 content areas, and they have identified kind of what those benchmarks would be, and they give that information to parents at each one of the reporting terms. And so with that, making growth, one of the things that they really are focusing on this year is guided reading books and making sure that they're trying to get students in kindergarten to read up through level D of guided reading before the end of the year. They're working hard on implementing a new system with reading buddies and the library and other areas so that they can have progress in those, and then they can start from E or wherever they're at in first grade and above. And I think a lot of these will talk about the priority standards and aligning those and working on their proficiency scales now. But one of the things that they didn't put on here that they've also really been working on this year was working through the data protocol and making sure that they are finding what they need to do as whole class interventions as well as individual interventions for students based on their data. So that was another thing that they've really worked hard on this year, is understanding and processing that data in different ways.
First grade, what we had done with all these slides, we had asked each grade to kind of come up with some celebrations that they had for their year and some of the highlights of that. So that's kind of what this slide shows. First grade celebrated that 83% of their first graders were proficient on the winter fast test. Everyone is showing growth in reading, continuing to work on those sight words. They just completed their bird research projects and are writing bird riddles and making scientific drawings based on their research. Again, as with every grade, they've completed all of their priority standards for all content areas, completed a curriculum alignment in all content areas, and now they're working on those proficiency scales. And so they've also have 4 UBD units that are in draft form that they'll have for every unit that they. Eventually they'll have one for every unit that they do.
It's fun seeing you all. I've had at least one of each of your kids, so it's like a blast from the past up there. So this is the second grade slide. They said, as a collective team, we've generated power standards and developed common assessments to align with our power standards in math and reading. In the winter, 59% of their students were proficient on the CBMR English FAST test. In the fall, only 67 were proficient, but 98% of those students made growth, so that's really exciting. And their last one is they just went on a field trip to the Temple Theater. All second graders demonstrated good character traits and represented I-35 well, so that's good to hear. Third grade, so third and fourth grade, our slides sound a lot alike because we do so much that's the same. But the third grade, they said we just finished taking the ISAPS test for the first time. They take reading, language arts, writing, and math, and they worked really hard and tried their best. During their PLC meetings, they finalized their power standards and vertically aligned them with other grades, and they are starting on proficiency scales for their standards so they can begin working on their unit plans. And the last one, they'll be goal setting with each student before their final CBMR FAST assessment, which is next week, or they begin next week, at least. Fourth grade, like I said, it's probably kind of repetitive at this point. But we also finalized all of our content area priority standards and worked with other grade levels to vertically align those. Math and ELA are done. We are still working on aligning social studies and science because we were missing a lot of people in the upper grades at that last PD meeting. On our winter fast assessments, we had 98% of fourth grade students made significant growth, and we're so excited. Some were like 20 words per minute growth since spring, and they have tried so hard. It's really exciting. Doesn't sound exciting in that bullet point, but it's really great. So students also just started our American Revolution unit. Did I say that right? Okay, it's been a long day. So they'll be writing their first narrative essay, and that will be really exciting because it's kind of like their big writing assignment to kind of lead them into middle school, and they've been doing amazing. So we're excited to see those. We also just completed the ISAP test in reading, ELA, and math. They worked so hard. They're also excited to get their scores back. They wanted them immediately. We set goals, and they have their incentive coming. Our goal is 80% proficient or growth. Kind of going to see how it goes, and they're super excited. So we hope to get those back ASAP. And the last one is we'll be taking the iReady Math Diagnostic Test this week, starting tomorrow actually. and then the spring fast reading and math assessments next week. So it's been a fantastic year in 4th grade, and we're looking forward to finishing strong. So thank you.
Any questions?
I've got a quick question. My mic's not working, but this is Richie. The Daycare Grant that you mentioned, can you give us a couple of details of how much that was and what specific it was for?
Well, Ms. Kristen Harris would be the one who is our
Okay.
daycare director that would probably give you really a lot better information.
Okay.
I don't know exactly how much they got
Okay.
for the grants, but I know that they got a new couch that the kids are really enjoying. Just new fun activities and things to beef up their daycare, so
Okay.
I apologize, I'm not able to answer that.
No
So,
problem. Thanks for being
Mr.
honest.
Knoy, that's the Iowa Workforce Grant that we wrote that included daycare to expand because we had such large numbers. It was about $80,000 total, and we used that for the taking down the blonde wall. You remember the brick wall, and we also did some of the air conditioning in that area to expand the classrooms, and then we also got supplies, games and things, and couches for the, and the,
Like grade level
yeah.
days on the couches.
That $80,000
Yeah.
couch.
So the bright wheels that they were talking about, that came from that grant as well. So that all kind of
Okay.
rolls into that Iowa Workforce Grant that we wrote.
I do remember that grant.
Yeah. And one of the things I was going to mention, because it's been alluded to a couple of times, but gold, do you want to explain what gold is for our, you want to come to the microphone, because then people in the recording can hear it
I'll
as well.
do my best with that. But gold, we report out with 2 times a year in the fall, and we're doing one here in the spring to kind of finish up the year. Gold is a really extensive, it's required by Iowa for us to complete all preschool programs. It covers all areas such as language arts, math, social, emotional, physical. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Math, or social studies, the arts, science is in there too. And they're based on bands that go from like, I think like yellow, green, blue, purple, pink, kind of that way. And you can kind of pick where your students fall within each one of those little bands on the criteria underneath. Let's say I'm doing physical. One would be balancing. Can they balance? Can they walk along a balance beam 1 foot in front of the other? And then I can kind of mark, they kind of give you criteria and where they fall on the band. So it's kind of a really extensive, in-depth look at your child. And it goes birth to up to preschool. Well, not birth, but like 3, and 4, and 5-year-olds. But I don't know if I explained that too well, but Jenny Dickinson is also your woman who explains that really well. So that's kind of just in a nutshell a little bit, but yeah. There's also talk about us doing the ASQSE, which is more gold. We don't know what's going to happen. There's rumor that it may go away. We haven't really gotten confirmation on that yet, so we shall see.
It's basically the standards.
Tons of them.
With a whole realm of fields. So, in kindergarten, we don't really assess balance, but we do measure how kids hold scissors. And so it's some of those things, and it's just what they use in preschool for their
Yes.
curriculum. And so it's the reporting out of that for parents, and then also to look for kids who maybe need extra support, so.
Yeah, we don't give that whole thing to parents because it would be very overwhelming to go through. We kind of pick out our highlights that we want to showcase for them, and just to kind of limit all the stuff. But yeah, they have access to a full report if they want it. So.
Mrs. Ritchie, I'd like to ask you.
Yeah.
You said that you guys switched accreditations.
Yes.
What is the difference? Is this one like better than the other one? Were there less standards in the old one?
Well, there's lots of similarities, so there's lots of things that cross nicely together, but there's also some differences. I think the NACE and AEYC was a little bit more, I don't want to say strict, but there were some other kind of stronger requirements than maybe the IQPPS had. Still the same kind of process as far as getting accreditation for either or, but the reason for switching over, I taught kindergarten last year, so I kind of just hopped it. I was preschool, then kindergarten, now preschool this year, so I just kind of hopped in right on an accreditation year. So I don't know the for sure reason why we switched from one to the other either. I think that was kind of a director's decision.
Yeah, it was a couple different things. One was a cost piece. There was a cost for NACI. The IQPPS doesn't have a cost. We have local support. They're right there in Des Moines. So there was just some reasons as IQPPS became more prevalent across the state, it just made sense to transition.
Both are very equally acceptable.
There are some things that one's more strict than the other one on, and then vice versa.
Yeah.
So.
I have one more question. When you were talking about the first grade, you mentioned UBD units.
So
Can you
UBD is
tell
just
me what that
understanding by design. So it's a process that's kind of spelled out in some books, studies that we've done here at school. And it's really just kind of working backwards from what is your priority standard? How do we know that they're successful? What are we going to do to show that they're successful? And then what lessons do we need to create in order to give them that information so that they can, again, show that they're successful on that test. So the UBD unit is just kind of really spelling out that whole piece all the way from the standard, breaking it down to what are the success criteria that we're going to see if we know that they're getting it, what tests are we going to give them so that they can demonstrate that, and then what's our lesson look like. So instead of having, here's my lesson plan I'm going to teach, and at the end of the unit I give a test, it's kind of just working backwards way of thinking where here's my test, and how do I create lesson plans to support that so that it supports the standard. So it's just kind of a big template that they work on to lay out each unit that they're going to do. Yep.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I'd have one. So are you guys seeing a difference between the kids that go to the daycare and the transition to pre-K and TK and kindergarten versus the kids that maybe didn't have the opportunity to go to the daycare? I'm trying to understand the value of the daycare, and I know, Miss Ritchie, it's not your daycare, right? You're just the one
Right.
probably closest to it, but I'm just curious.
I would say that having that daycare, that half-day 3-year-old in there, when they are in there, you can tell a difference. Those kids are able to come in with knowledge of how to use scissors and writing their name and a basic knowledge of shapes and number a little bit. And then we just kind of, it sets them up for a pretty good foundation. We kind of can grow from that in the 4-year-old when they get to 4-year-old. So I would say yes.
Okay.
Hey there.
Hey.
So
Mom.
that little 3-year-old guy running around back there, he goes to the half-day 3-year-old preschool, and then he also goes to the wraparound daycare. And as a parent, he came in as just the cutest, tiniest little thing, and now he can write his name. He knows the Pledge of Allegiance. He knows all the rules. He kind of the procedures of the school. In addition to all this other amazing stuff, he will not stop singing the ABCs. Just all of the academic part. And then as a teacher, having him here, I'm able to come to these earlier meetings. Like today, I got to stay late because he was at daycare without worrying about all the stress of getting to daycare, picking him up. So it is a benefit for the students, but also for the teachers of the district. It's been amazing.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, he's still cute. Yes.
Thank you.
And he's still cute. So.
He is cute.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, we are going to the Positive Accomplishments Tour.
Yes, so we are actually going to go over to the greenhouse and take a tour of the greenhouse, and then Miss Klingsmith's students are going to give us an overview of their aquaponics, which they wrote a grant for and have set up in the CTE building. So we're going to go take a tour.
All right. We are back. Did Mr. Borseth submit a report?
I thought Mr. Casper told me email one to him. Let me check my
If-
email too and see.
I was gonna say, maybe we can circle back to it if he did.
I do not have one.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and move to the principal reports if everybody's okay with that. And if we do have a report from Mr. Borseth, maybe Mr. Castor can just add it to his.
Agreeing with his.
Yep.
I can go ahead and go first. I don't have a whole lot to add. I know we covered a lot of our stuff in our BLT presentation earlier. We're just in that phase where we're kind of wrapping up towards the end of the year here, finishing up evaluations and getting those back to teachers. Got a few openings, working on filling. We've got iReady testing coming up this week. We've got not map testing, but fast testing coming up, so those final assessments of the year. So excited to see what that information comes back. I know a little bit that was shared in our presentation. The kids are excited to see how those come back. Hoping we get our ISASP results back before the end of the year, so we can start to see that and see how that growth went. Other than that, we're just finishing up some of those things. We have some field trips going on, kids going out to Civic Center shows. It's nice to kind of get back to having those types of spring events. We do have a field day being planned in the works, so I got thinking it's been several years since we've had a actual field day. I know we had one planned for last year, got rained out. The year before we weren't here, so it goes back a few years since we've had one. So hopefully we can get that planned and the weather cooperates, and we can have a chance to get those kids out there and get some parents here and have a good field day at the end of the year. So just those last end of the year things, and it's exciting time. It's a busy time, but you know, the weather gets nicer. The kids have more fun outside. It's just it's nice to. It's a fun time of the year when the weather starts doing things and lots of kids get out there, and you just kind of see they're kind of reinvigorated after the doldrums of winter have kind of worn out. So that's really all I got for you.
Is there any questions for Mr. Tessa? Mr. Castor?
So Will sent me an email. He wasn't able to make it tonight. He had a prior commitment. I talked to him earlier today, so he said he was going to be here. So it must have been something that he learned, appointment or what otherwise. But he did send 3 notes. Number 1, encourage the seniors to finish out the year in a strong position, not to fall on the senior slide. I will encourage him to help me encourage those seniors with that as well. But I appreciate his thoughtfulness with that. Prom and after prom were a huge success. Thank you to the staff and parents for chaperoning that and making it a possibility. And then his last note here, which I think is extremely thoughtful, but personal appreciation from himself for allowing him to be a part of this position. He's learned a lot from each one of you, and he apologizes for his absence. But those were Will's notes from this month. As far as the secondary goes, we as well have a lot going on. I always say once you get to spring break, it's generally a whirlwind from there to the finish. So right now it seems to be we're in the middle of all of those end of the year type events. So the other day we had prom. That's usually the first one towards the first part of April. We took the seniors cap and gown picture the other day, so all of our seniors were here in their caps and gowns. We'll put that in the Tri-Corner Express and do a nice spread with that. Baccalaureate is Wednesday night, at 7 p.m. in Martinsdale. So we just start hitting a bunch of dates all in a row, which are really good events for our seniors. Traditionally, we have a great turnout at Baccalaureate and all of those senior awards nights and things that are going to come up. So you guys are welcome to all of those. I've got a sheet here with all those dates on it that you're welcome to take with you when we're all done here tonight. So 4 weeks left. Like Will said, we've got a lot of focus that needs to happen for some when it comes to making sure that we do finish on a strong note. So we keep a close eye on those kiddos. Just a quick thing this has been going on all year, but our back to school bash, our STEM nights, our donuts for grown-ups that we had the other day, that was all part of an initiative to get some parent involvement take place this year. Those have been extremely successful. Rose Dickinson and Angela Steinloggy and Thad Tussey, and I think Mr. Weber has been a part of some of those. The I-team, the instructional coaches are all great at supporting those events. And so if you haven't been to any of those things, please come out and join those, because they're getting parents here, they're involved, and our kids are really enjoying those. So thank you for supporting that, number one, but I would encourage the district next year to consider supporting that again, because they truly have been very successful. Let's see, what else do I have? Breakfast for graduation is Friday, May 20th. It's just after rehearsal at 8:15. If you want to see a group of 18-year-old soon-to-be graduates really groggy, 8:15 in the morning is that time, that Friday morning, but they're all there. They come smiling, or as much as smiling as we can get them there at 8:15, and we go through rehearsal, and then breakfast afterwards provided by the parents. You guys are always welcome to attend any and either of those. Graduation is Sunday, May 22nd at 2 p.m. We are planning to do graduation here in the auditorium. Tiffany and I came in and walked through the logistics of that the other day, and I think that we have a great plan for that, to make it about the kids, and we've got plenty of room. We actually have the same amount of tickets that we're going to issue families as we've had in years past. So anybody that comes in and says there's not going to be enough room, we are actually going to issue tickets, and we have extra. So we've got contingency plans if we do pack the house. We'll live stream and do all that stuff. We have overflow in the commons that we can place. So we're excited about what could be with that. As far as number one, temperature is always, if you have attended graduation in the last few years, it seems to be 99% humidity and roughly 90 degrees that day at about 2 o'clock. But it'll be climate controlled in here. So we're excited to give that a try and be the first year we try that. So I'll send out an agenda. This is mainly for the board, but I'll send out an agenda the week of graduation so that you guys know what time to be, where to be, that sort of thing. If you have any questions prior to that, certainly reach out. But lots going on in the next 3.5 or 4 weeks in the secondary. Thanks, guys.
Are there any questions for Mr. Castor? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Castor. Superintendent report.
So I have 3 things on the list, and then one that I'm going to add just because I've had about it in the last week or so. The first one is the foundation update. This is our group of community members that have been diligently working to raise money for projects and needs that our school has. So tapping into alumni and different organizations to try and generate money so that we can establish a foundation that then awards scholarships or grants to teachers to help with maybe extra projects or extra things they want to do in the class. So that group did a giving campaign in November, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, and that I want to say within the last month, and they raised over I think $11,000 in that first kind of go around, and it was just a kind of an online campaign. So they met about 2 weeks ago and awarded their first grant, which was similar, tied to a project that Steve talked about, our Family STEM Nights. One of the things that the team that created that Family STEM Night did was any student that comes to the Family STEM Night with their parent leaves with a book around the theme of what the night is. So if you came to all 5 STEM nights, you now have a library of 5 more books than you had at the beginning of the year. And so we had some donations from, Rose Dickinson donated one night, her and her husband donated one night of books, and so we've had some donations of food for those projects, but and Stephanie Brown isn't here, but her group wrote a grant to the foundation requesting that they pay for the last 3 nights of books, and they did approve that. So they were excited to get their first dollars out the door, so to speak, and to such a good cause. So they have lots of ideas about getting out and getting visible this summer at some of our community events, and then trying to determine what they want to do for their kind of annual fundraiser. So there'll be more on that. But just wanted to give you an update on the work they're doing, because they work really hard, and they've got a lot of great ideas. Their information for anybody that wants to know about that group is actually found on our website. There's a link to the I-35 Foundation, so you can see who the members are. You can see what their philosophy is, or what their beliefs are. All their organizing documents are on there as well. So that's a great place to go to get more information about the foundation. Any questions about that group? The next thing that I wanted to talk about was the Long Range Facilities Committee. We have Eddie and Roger both. I was thankful they were both able to join that group maybe a week ago and talk through that project. So about 3 months ago, the board approved us to work with an architect and plan for future facility wants and needs. The idea was, as we look at grant opportunities, as we look at replacing things that need to be updated, that we're doing it mindfully of where we want to be in 5 years or in 10 years. So, for example, we know we need to do some work on the bleachers at the football field. And so the conversation that I had with Mr. Smith when he was here, and now Mr. Weber, is if we are going to replace stands, but we might replace or relocate the football field, because there's lots of challenges with the current field that we'd have to upgrade, which, we may do. Will they be portable, right? Can we move them? Will that be something that we have as an option? So keeping kids safe now and keeping our patrons safe now, but also thinking future. And so that committee met initially with the architects and gave them kind of our areas of interest, areas of study. And then that group came for 2 or 3 days and talked to 2 days and talked to the coaches and to the students and to the people who use those facilities day in and day out. And they took back all the notes from those ideas. And when I talked to the architects, I said, I want them to dream big, right? If we're going to make facilities that are going to be here for 30 years or 40 years, we want them to be user-friendly, we want them to be useful, knowing that we might not get everything we want, but if we don't talk about it, there's no way we're going to get it. So they came up with quite an extensive wish list, but it's exciting to think about. And so that group is now, we met a week ago, I want to say, Wednesday or Thursday last week, and went through what some of those ideas were and next steps. So I guess I'll let you guys talk to kind of your thoughts on that, if you have any that you want to share.
Yeah, my thoughts were we're in the planning stage right now. We don't know what we don't know, right? And so this is just going to help us narrow that funnel of options down to projects. And then once we get some more granularity on how much a project will cost, then I think we'll go to the public and say, what is it that, work together to figure out how to prioritize effectively the projects that we have. But yeah, now we're just at the dreamer stage, and there was a lot of dreaming going on. So if you see a schematic of the next best thing, don't think it's far from a done deal, right? We still are in the information gathering stage. But I was on there as just an observer and just kind of a curiosity. It was really neat to see what the future might entail. So, and we had everything from athletic facilities to it's not home ec. Family consumer sciences, to just the things that have been kind of issues, science rooms. Yes, issues that needs to be dealt with, right? And so then we can prioritize. So good. I thought it was a really good interaction between the architect, and the architect did say that his interactions with our students and the teachers and everyone has been so productive, and so it's helpful for me to understand when a third party comes in and actually does a lot of the interviewing of the people that are going to use the facilities and the users. So it was good to be a part of it, and I appreciated it. So look forward to it.
Roger, did you have anything to add? Okay. They must not have given you a mic for a reason. The other thing that I wanted to tag on to that was kind of an ongoing conversation about our HVAC project. We had the challenge with our bid coming back substantially higher than what was projected. And so if public remembers that we were going to use ESSER money to kind of finish off or at least move further in our air conditioning phase to get our building air conditioned. And so at the last meeting, or maybe the meeting before that, we rejected the bids because they were so high. And so we had asked the architect to go back and kind of maybe talk to the contractors, talk to the people who had bid to see what their concerns were or why the bid came in so high, and maybe what our next steps are for that project. And so one of the things that they gave us a couple of things. First was there's not a lot of mechanical contractors that will bid national or federal dollar projects. So what that means is the person who maybe did our air conditioning in one of the phases is a mechanical contractor, and instead of dealing with all of the paperwork that goes with a federal dollar and some of the Davis-Bacon wage requirements and things like that, they just won't bid them. And so the number of people that we had that bid was less because of the federal money that would have been tied to it, which is our ESSER money, which is how we would have paid for it. So what they suspect is the two bids that we had were from general contractors who would have then done all the paperwork for the mechanical contractors who would have come in and done the work. And so he's saying, the architect is saying that we saw about a 10 to 15% increase in the bid just because of that federal dollar requirements with Davis-Bacon and some of those things. So his suggestion was, so we asked about that. We asked about the schedule. Was it too tight? Because we had asked that it be done by, the beginning of school, and he said no, it wasn't overly aggressive. It wasn't that it couldn't be done. It was just they're so busy that they're full, and so trying to make time for the project would have been a challenge. So the cost went up. And then the last thing was, kind of the scope of the project. We had put it all in, I think, 2 different phases. It was the rest of the middle school project and then the high school project. And they're suggesting that maybe we reduce that to 4 and do a middle school east and west, and then do a high school east and west, so that if we have to do it in phases, we can use federal dollars for phase 1 and phase 2, and maybe consider, PEPL or SAVE money for, say, phase 3 or phase 4. And so the idea was to break it apart a little bit more so that maybe it's a little bit more manageable if costs don't come down significantly. The other thing that was a recommendation for moving forward is if we're doing another project, like we've talked about family consumer science, and renovating that room, if we're already going to have a general contractor in to do that work, the recommendation was we add the air conditioning project to a project like that. So the general contractor is already here. They would still have a mechanical contractor that they're working with on, and I'm using the family consumer science room as an example, and then they would just build in that scope of that work into the project. So you're not actually having a general contractor come in for 2 different projects. It's one bigger project. That might be more incentive for contractors to bid.
Can you do that would all of that project be a prevailing wage job then, whether it be funded by ESSER money or not money then, or?
I think it would all fall under the prevailing wage requirements, but I don't know that it matters, and I would have to find out more where the money comes from. If any part of it is with federal dollars, then
Right.
the whole project becomes prevailing wage.
Would we pay more money for all of it then?
In theory, yes.
Okay.
Questions about either of those, the long-range planning facility or the HVAC?
Well, I think we should just be very clear that with knowing what we know right now, HVAC upgrades will not be happening this summer.
Correct.
Just be very clear so that nobody thinks they are, because I think that was all of our hope, that we'd be able to get that done. So, okay.
And then then the last item that I had, well, the last one on the agenda is the Teacher Leadership Committee update. We did meet with the Teacher Leadership Committee. That is a group of administrators and a group of teachers that are representatives of the association. And we talked through how the money is being allocated and what needs we have, what we might want to shift or what we might want to change. And so there were a couple of recommendations by that group, and the first was we currently have about 10 to 12 mentors in the building who work with new teachers, and our challenge was trying to make sure that all of those teachers and mentors and the people in that program had adequate time to meet and then communicate information consistently. And so as a result of some of those challenges, the recommendation was we move from 10 to 12 mentors to having a mentor that works with any new elementary teacher, any new middle school teacher, any new high school teacher, or any new special education teacher, so that that one mentor can be oversight for any of the new teachers in that grade span, to create a little bit more consistency and maybe a little bit more flexibility for getting a sub in. So if they want to go visit the classrooms of all the new middle school teachers, we can get a sub in for a half of a day or a whole day, and that one person can go into all those different classrooms and work with teachers instead of trying to get a schedule with 10 or 12 to do that. The other thing that we realized is as we worked through, you heard the team talking about proficiency scales and talking about understanding by design or UBD units, or talking about power standards and creating a report card. There's been a lot of conversation around different content areas and how those content areas work vertically. So from kindergarten through 12th grade, how does our science build every year so that by the time they're in 12th grade, they get the skills they need to be successful for whatever's next. And so the recommendation was, because we're eliminating some of those mentor positions, we would add what we call content specialists. And so we would have a content specialist for science and for math and for social studies. And they would work with teams of teachers or individual teachers on some of those processes where they're building assessments that are tied to standards. So those teachers would be trained in that curriculum content writing process specifically for those content areas. So with the Teacher Leadership Grant, I know some of you have not had a lot of experience with that because it's been in place for so long. The goal for the Teacher Leadership Grant is to try and get 25% of your teachers into teacher leadership positions. And so because we reduced the number of mentors, we needed to add positions. And so that was a nice fit that we had this need for the content specialists, and we were going to modify the mentor positions so we'd had a little bit more consistency with that. So we are back to about 12 or 13 positions as a result of that shift, which puts us right at that 25% with our 4 instructional coaches, and looking at about the same in amount of money spent, because they get a little bit of a stipend when they take on that position, because sometimes it does ask them to maybe meet outside of the contract for a little bit, or have them give up a prep period for something, so we compensate for that work. So that was all taken to the committee and approved by the committee. So when you look at the consent agenda, there's the new positions on there. We defined the mentor position a little bit more detail, and we also included that teacher leader content specialist job description on there. So those are both in the consent agenda coming up. So any questions about the teacher leadership? We get about $240,000 a year for that. And so the idea is obviously to build capacity for our teachers to be leaders in the classroom, leaders in the system, because we know we've always have a lot of work to do. So.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Dentlinger on any of the topics she covered?
The last one I'm just going to add, because I've had a couple of people ask me in the last week or so about the resource News ELA, and some people call it News ELA, some people call it Newsella. It is a resource that has been used in schools for lots of different reasons. There's content on there for English and for science and social studies, articles that are age appropriate and grade appropriate, sometimes reading level appropriate on any range of topics. And so at one time, that was a service that teachers may have used to find a topic or an article about, let's say, tornadoes at varying reading levels, so that if you had a really high reader, you could have a topic or an article about tornadoes, and you could have maybe an average student, and you could have a lower level article as well. At one point, that became a paid service, and I'm not sure when that all happened, if there's still a free version, what that consists of. But there's been conversations around critical race theory, because it's tied directly with, they'll tell you it's tied directly with News ELA or News Ella. And so the questions that we've had is, do we use that subscription here? And we do not. And I know it's sometimes easier to talk about the whole program of what it is, so that if there are questions, we can get a little bit more clarity. The district does not pay for that subscription, but there may be a time when we've used it to do different leveling of articles or information. And so some teachers might know what it is, but we currently do not subscribe to that. So I know there's been questions around that in the last, I've probably answered 2 or 3 questions in the last week, so I thought while we're talking about it, then everybody can hear the same thing. And if there are more questions, people can always contact me.
Thank you for bringing it up, because I hadn't heard. I must live in a box or something. I hadn't heard.
I've never heard of it before.
No, but thanks.
All right, are there any other questions are there any questions for Mrs. Dentlinger? Not hearing any, we'll move on to the consent items. This does require a motion and a second for us to vote to approve the past meeting minutes, which we've all received, the monthly bills and financial statements with the added listings that we got tonight, open enrollment, and then the resignation and contracts. There's a number of them. I'm going to read through them. Haley Young Dravenga resigns as middle school interventionist. Josiah Appel resigns as elementary music teacher. Jamie Gelner resigns as 5th grade middle school teacher. Alicia Sand resigns as 4th grade teacher. Jill Scholl resigns as kindergarten teacher. Paula Schultz resigns as librarian. Faith Curry resigns as general associate. Cheryl Young resigns as sub-calling associate. Jerry Young resigns as high school robotics coach. Diana Irwin resigns as cook. Caitlin Pieton resigns as high school teacher. Thad Tussey resigns elementary counselor and substitute bus driver added. Is that correct?
So 11, 12, and 13 were all added today.
Oh, okay, that's what it
Yeah.
was. Carrie Thompson resigns as high school math teacher. Bree Houston hired as daycare associate closer. Josh Klein hired as head assistant middle school baseball coach. Steve Castor hired as substitute bus driver. Don Bedwell hired as substitute bus driver. Steve Drevitt hired as substitute bus driver. Caitlin Hackley hired as custodian. Blake Bauer hired as PE health teacher. Sharon Whitson resigns as PE health teacher. Sharon Whitson hired as assistant secondary principal. And Damon Bryan and Mike Stewart split strength and conditioning stipend. Those do require a motion and a second.
So before you do that, E, F, and G are also part of the consent agenda this time.
E, F, and G.
Yeah, so if the
Okay.
job descriptions are E, the sharing agreement is a work-based learning coordinator we've talked about in the past with Winterset. And then that 10-day librarian contract, so Paula Schultz, the librarian that resigned in the C section, her contract is for 10 days. And so she does ordering of books and making sure our circulation is current and all of that. So we worked with Winterset, and they have a full-time librarian, and so she's gonna take on those 10-day responsibilities. So it's not a sharing agreement for operational sharing purposes, but we are gonna share that position with Winterset. So that's what that G is and why it's a separate category.
And the reason we don't share technically or formally is because we're already maxed out on our sharing agreements,
No,
or
it's
no?
just not one of those in the category that we can share and get operational funding for.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? If not, we need a motion and a second to act on the consent agenda items.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent items as mentioned, A through G.
I'd second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda items A through G. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Items for discussion. We already covered the elementary school building goals review, so we'll move to the human resources updates.
So Jen Bothman is here to go through this, and I think this will be kind of a tag team approach to this. So, yeah, just the microphone. And this is, obviously, if you look at our consent agenda, you see a ton of people resigning, and there's been lots of questions about resignations and kind of what people are leaving for, what are we doing as part of that work. And so Jen and I are going to talk through some of the things we've done in the past and what we're talking about in the future, and she's got some information about exit interviews that she's done, so we'll go through as much as we can and answer whatever questions we can.
So the first one I'll talk to you about is the actual Wonder program that we started here, which I am a part of. On March 28th, there is 18 participants that started in this program. We are currently in our 5th week of it. Each week we get informational videos and just helpful tips based on how you filled out your information. So some people may have information on activities because they're more activity driven. Some may have it on food and how you can use these to help you not only lose the weight, but also reduce stress, better sleeping, just a better quality of life overall. The program is very awesome, I think, in my opinion. The coaches are very encouraging. They send out little tidbits, little reminders, little notices, just kind of showing you, helping you along the way, encouraging you to do their steps, encouraging you to drink the water, or if that doesn't work for you, they have other options for you. So it's very helpful and very motivating. It's nice to have that piece in place. And then after 3 months with the program, they will actually provide us data to kind of show us where we're at with our 18 participants, how successful they've been. The only thing that they could really provide me right now is the fact that all 18 of the participants have regularly logged in and they are keeping up with the videos, they are keeping up with the program. None of them have kind of started it and then stopped, which they say is very good, because a lot of us, you know, start resolutions and then we quit them after week 2 or 3. So yeah. As Sharon said, in the past 3 years since I've been here, I have done exit interviews with different people leaving, whether it's support staff, teachers, whatever the case may be. I went through those exit interviews and those different people that I've talked to, and I've kind of come up with some of the top reasons why. So number 1, tied for opportunity of advancement and salary and benefits. Number 2 was overall leadership of our district, or family/personal reasons. We've had different ones that have had to move back home for elderly parents, or they've had children and they've decided to, you know, resign for a while, stay home with the children. Those are obviously things that we can't change. Some other things were they found a position closer to home. A lot of our teachers will live up towards the Des Moines area, and if they find a job up in that area that's 5 minutes from home, that's one thing that they want to do. I did have a couple that left us because they wanted more coaching opportunities, which I don't know what else we could open up. We have a whole list of things, and some of them aren't taken at the current time, so maybe it's a thing that we need to communicate that more. The other piece that we have done is job fairs. We have held 3 here at the school on different dates. The first one was last May, and we've had 2 others since, so 3 total in the last year. And each one we've been fairly successful. Yes, we haven't had a lot of people come through the door, but the ones that we've had come through the door, we've at least hired probably 1 or 2 out of each one. Correct? So that has been nice, very promoting for the school. We take them on tours, we answer questions, and we've gotten a few really good candidates that way. Sharon and I have also attended a couple of career fairs. One was at the Army National Guard in Johnston. It went okay. It was a little challenging. There was careers there for everything, and so it was just different. The last one that I went to, I ended up going with Heather Dutry, and that was up at Iowa State. We went to their career fair, and within probably the first 20 minutes, Sharon told us we needed to find a science teacher, and we had 3 applications. So that one was very rewarding. And it was just nice to get our name out there to show them, hey, this is interstate, we aren't that far away. Some of them had actually heard of us, so that was interesting, that was nice. A few of them hadn't, but once you say you're only about 20-25 minutes from Jordan Creek, they kind of perk up and, oh, okay. So it's kind of nice. So those are kind of the updates and things that I've been working on. If you guys have any questions.
Can you explain a little bit more about the Wonder program?
So
How did you guys get into it? Is it through insurance?
Yes, it is through
okay.
the health insurance. It was Mark Becker, now it's Gallagher. Kathy had brought it to us through that company, and they have done it in the past. She has actually participated in it, and so she brought the information to us. Actually, I think it was our insurance group, or was it just us admin? The insurance group, and just kind of put it out there for us to look at. We've kind of viewed that this would be a positive thing, because if you increase people's health plus stress plus eating and all of that, you're making it so that you're not using the insurance as much, which are reducing your claims, which comes back to benefit the district. So that's kind of where we started from.
And the 28 were, or the 18, I can't remember, was a
18?
pilot program. We wanted to try it on about a third, right? Of the
Yeah, we kind of wanted to try it just on a third of the faculty in the district, just to kind of see, give it a pilot run. With the program, the district will only pay if those 18 are successful, and there's a percentage that they go by and they base this off of. So there's a weight loss percentage, and there's different factors. So unless the participant is successful, there's no payment.
Have we, excuse me, have we thought about giving a survey to the current teachers and the current staff on what they love about I-35? Like a confidential survey, or what maybe they...
So that is also part of the exit interview when I do that. I don't do that to returning staff, but I've done that with part of the exit process. You know, what do you like about I-35? Some of the comments I've gotten back is they love the fact that we're a close-knit type group. They find that it's more of a home-based type atmosphere here. There's just some really good things that we are doing here. I mean, there's always room for improvement, like everything, but there are some good and positive things. But if you guys want more of that, I can definitely get you some more information.
Okay.
So does everybody that leaves, thank you, Jen, for this.
Yeah.
This is a very informational topic. I think it's great. Does everybody get an exit interview?
Yes.
Okay, the option to, because I mean, that's something I think a lot of companies actually neglect, because if the employee's on the way out, then who cares, right?
No,
I
that's
think they
kind
see
of
it
the
as a sunk
philosophy.
cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we kind of wanted to see, why are they on the way out? Is there something that we can be doing to make it better? And if
Yeah.
so, what does that look like?
And I think with the attrition rate, it might be good to, now with everything going on, to figure out how many people are leaving education or the educational field altogether. Like to add that field, because you see all this anecdotal evidence of, you know, teachers getting burnt out and administrators at their wits' end and, you know, whatever. But if we would have the data, I think it'd be kind of interesting, because I know there's been, since I've been here, there's been a number of people that have left just they're done with education. So I
Yeah,
don't
we
know.
can-
I'd be curious. My curiosity would be if it's actually increasing over the last few years with the stress of
With
COVID or
the
whatever.
pandemic. Yeah, we can definitely add that this year as a question just to see.
If it's informational for you, you know.
Yeah.
I just,
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
It's helpful to know if it's something that we're doing or is it something that's totally out of our scope of
Yeah.
being able to handle.
Do we do anything with benchmarking or tracking turnover rate with our school, with similar schools, whether it be maybe conference schools? You know, you gotta somewhat find your niche, right, of
Right.
comparable schools. Is there any of that information available that we do use or could use?
Yeah, I don't know that anybody has kept track of it to date, but we meet with conference school, I meet with the superintendents once a month, and they would all share that with us. So we can dig into that. I know Jen's got a network of HR directors as well, so we can create, everyone's really good about sharing information, so we can create something around that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually meeting, our HR group is meeting here the 1st of May, so I can throw that out to them, and I'm sure I would get some good data back just to see.
There's a lot of movement in the workforce in general right now, whether it's leaving education or going to different opportunities, and how much is that different and how much is that affecting our district? I don't know that we really have that answer. So that'd be interesting to know, you know, and then you have the data of your exit interviews on, well, why are people leaving? And then we can really dig in and understand some trends.
Would that be something that Margaret Buckton maybe has?
She probably has it more on a state
La-
level.
Larry Siegel
Larry Siegel and Margaret, yeah, they
have
might
it on
have
his
it.
dashboard?
They might have it on a state level, but we can definitely get it from local as well. Yeah, this is not something that's unique to I-35,
No.
but I think
No.
looking at the percentages is important to look at and trying to work through. I will, to tag on to that, so once we kind of have some ideas of why, our task is, okay, so what can we do about it? You know, and so about 6 months ago, we created a wage committee, compensation committee group that meets on Fridays to talk through, you know, what are we doing? How can we either be more competitive, which, you know, is always tough when you're talking about Des Moines schools, but how can we be more competitive, or what can we offer that maybe will attract and retain some teachers? Because I think if you look at our data, we usually lose most of our teachers around year 2 or 3. And I've talked to every teacher that's turned in their resignation for this year. I've talked to them all, and primarily, if it's not a family reason for leaving, or because they're leaving education in general, it's because of the commute and the time. And I've had people tell me, I just can't keep doing an hour and 15 minutes one way. And I've got family, and I completely understand that, because I will tell any person that works here, your family is first. That's your first priority, so you do what's best for them. But I will say that, you know, that might be something that we face always, just because of our location. But what can we do? And so there are 2 kind of ideas that we're penciling out details for. One of them is looking at options to offset or pay for part of advanced degrees so that they have more opportunities. I know a lot of businesses do, you know, an incentive to do, you know, a graduate program or something like that. So we're talking about what that looks like. And then the other one, and I think it gets to be a little bit trickier, is how are we compensating our individuals when we've had a salary schedule for, you know, 30 years that's been negotiated, and how do we don't have any additional money. We don't have any more funds coming in that say you can use X now for retention. We just don't have that. And so if we see a lot of schools increasing their base, how are we going to increase our base yet still provide recognition and you know, I wouldn't say reward, but retention strategies to keep people here after they meet certain markers, 5 years, 10 years, that kind of thing. And so those are conversations that we're having in the compensation committee. Obviously, those will all go to the association and conversations with the association and then come to you before we can enact any of them. But we're trying to be a little bit more deliberate about how we're using the money we do have to maybe target some of these specific challenges. And, you know, as we tried with our job fairs, we've never done it before. Last year was our first year. I told you last time we had a 50% rate at our last one, which Roger told me was great. We actually have a 100% rate from our last one because we hired one of our additional visitors. So we had 2 people show up and they are both now employed here, and I think they're both enjoying it. So we're excited, and we do that so that they can talk to the people and they can get direct questions answered, because nobody knows what it's like to be a school associate. So we want you to talk to a school associate so you can find out what it's like. And so if anybody has ideas, we are more than willing and happy to listen to them and try and figure out how we can make them work to get good people in here for our kids. So a lot going on, but still a lot to do.
Yes.
You know, I think you talked a lot about the compensation and what we can do, and I'm glad you're, you know, involving a lot of the staff and members in trying to figure that out. You know, it's also, you know, I'm Mr. Soft Skills guy, but, you know, it's the cultural things that this district has been working on and needs to continue to work on, and as we continue to grow that, you know, that's a big piece for the retention. I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't already know, but just continuing to keep our focus on there and listening to the staff and the teachers, and, you know, if, you know, people want to stay where they feel like they belong too, so.
As I tell all the staff, my door is always open. If they have questions, concerns, whatever, so they can always come see me.
Is the commute because they don't associate this with home, or is it, you know, there not enough housing opportunities in the area?
Yes.
Yes and yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's all part of it. I think that one of the things that I've heard from staff who are still here, who love I-35 and have been here for 20 years, is, you know, that we used to do a lot more as a staff outside of school. You know, so you built friendships on that. The challenge we have is there's not an abundance of housing, so we don't have places necessarily for our teaching force to come here and establish that kind of an environment. And so we're working with conversations about how we can, you know, maybe build capacity for more housing in the area, but obviously that's not something the school can control. So I think that's when Jeff was talking about the mullet meetings, and yes, I did say that out loud, even though I thought I never would. The business in the front and the party in the back. But that's an attempt to kind of help with some of that, to get to know people beyond just what you do every day in school. And it's challenging because if you live 25, 30, 35, 45 minutes away and you have children and they're involved in things, you're going and activities and events and things like that. So, you know, how do we try and get more of that family feel? And it's part of it's going to bring, how do we get people in the communities so that they can live here and be a part of those events on a regular basis. So it's a combination of, I think, a lot of things.
It was that's right, and all those other reasons to have a daycare, right? It's more than just, obviously it benefits the kids, but it also benefits the greater community too if we're filling a need for both. So
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the Reconsideration Committee appointment. Sharon, does this require a vote, or is this?
Oh, yes, I don't think I put that on there.
Okay. So
You just actually have to appoint and approve the appointment, so the vote is on the appointment.
it would take a motion and a second
Yes.
to approve the appointment.
Yep. And typically, we'll do this in November when we do our scheduling of all the people on the different committees, the SIAC and you know, you get assigned to the Madison County supervisors or whatever groups you're assigned to. We just, in all honesty, we've never had a request for reconsideration. And so this is a new process, so we're working through it. So all of the people that are listed here, with the exception possibly of Paula Schultz, just because she has turned in her resignation, so I'm not sure if she's going to be a permanent member of that. So I might bring an alteration to that once I talk to her and to the lady at Winterset. But we did have a request for reconsideration for one of our books in our library, so we want to work through this process and make sure that our policy is what we want it to be and that it works the way it's meant to get feedback from our community and from those people that are interested in our curriculum. So this is an appointment for that committee. Like I said, typically we'll do this in November. We're going to do it now because we want to work through the process with the requests that we have. All of these members in the community, all of the students and all of the administrators and teachers have been contacted and are all willing to serve on the committee. And so I ask that you appoint this committee of community members and staff and students.
Could I ask about the process
Sure.
for reconsideration and how it all happens, and just a reminder of that?
Sure. And this is all in our board policy. So a patron, anyone can make a request that we reconsider curriculum materials, library books, really any of the things that we use to educate students. And so the request is made. The first step in that process is for me to meet informally with whomever makes the request and see if there's something that we can either resolve or some way we can work through the process. And then if that doesn't come to a resolution that maybe is going to meet our needs for whatever the item is that they're asking for reconsideration of, then the reconsideration committee is formed or meets, and they are given the book. Let's say in this case it's a book. They're given the book. They're given any reviews of the book, any information about the book and how it's used for literary purposes and what the intent is. And so then they review all of that. They make a recommendation to me, and then I bring the recommendation to the board, whether or not we're going to keep the book, whether we're going to possibly remove it, what we're going to do with that. And then as a board, you decide whether or not you're going to go with my recommendation. So.
Got it. So it's not a binding recommendation. We can come to a different conclusion if
Correct.
we want. Okay.
Correct.
And then
And
you
really,
said
it's my recommendation, and then if members of the committee or the patrons still don't like what was resolved, they can come to you, just like we do with discipline hearings and things like that.
Gotcha. And you said anyone can come. Is it anyone in the district, any taxpayer, or just
Yeah,
anyone?
I don't know that our policy is that strict.
Got it.
I would interpret it as any taxpayer or any patron of our district
Okay.
that has questions or wants something to be reconsidered.
Got it. And then are the people on this committee given all the facts, like the number of times this book has been checked out?
They can ask for all of that, and the
Okay.
person who's making the petition or the request that we reconsider can meet with that committee and talk through what their concerns are. So they
Got
can
it.
be invited and talk through what their concerns are, why they're making the request, so the committee can ask them any kinds of questions that they want to, and get as much information from whoever's making the request as well.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I know it is in the board policies, but I was just curious. Thank
Well,
you.
and it's actually the procedures, so it's not actually in the policy. It just says in the policy that it can be reconsidered, things can be reconsidered, and this is the steps we do to reconsider.
Got it. And do other districts have reconsiderations or some?
Yeah, almost all of them do.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
built in almost.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that we're talking about that came out of the meeting that I had with the patron is, is there a difference between library materials and curriculum? So library materials, they're not required. They're not things that have to be checked out. And so how do we monitor that, or how do we evaluate their value? Because I could think I want my kid to read whatever's in the library, and we can talk about it if there's questions, whereas Melissa might not. She
Yeah.
might want her child to not read anything, any Harry Potter books, right? Because
Yeah.
they contain witchcraft or whatever. And so the conversation is, how do we maybe give parents a little bit more awareness or role in what their students are checking out of the library, but not restrict other kids and what they might want to check out. So I know a lot of districts, Steve and I have talked about this a couple of different times, but they're maybe compiling a system where a book, if it's been asked to be, or it may be flagged for content, whether it's, you know, sexually explicit material or whatever, profanity or any of these categories, that somehow when the checkout process goes through, if this is something that your parent needs to be aware of, wants to have knowledge of before you check it out, we just make sure that we get that approval. Because we are still talking about minors. We are still talking about,
Yes.
you know, kids who, for whatever reason, whatever their dynamic is with their family, we want to make sure we honor that.
Yep.
But at the same time, we also don't want to limit somebody from having opportunities to read things and prohibit that avenue as well. So we're talking through what that looks like, and I think there was a very good discussion about that when we talked about this, but we also wanted to work through this process to make sure that it did work and that there were things that we could bring to the table and have questions about and make sure that our policy or our procedure in this case, you know, took us through the steps that it needed to determine.
Yep, because we do it a little differently, right? Because the parent can opt out of curriculum. But in the library system,
Yeah.
we give them the opportunity to, but yet we're also providing a veto right to.
We don't have that in place yet, but that's what I think a lot of schools are talking about. And I don't know, Steve, if you've talked to any of the other principals in the conference that I mean, it's just a beginning conversation because I think this is, obviously it's a hot topic for a lot of different reasons. And so what are we doing? Because parents want to be involved and we want that, but at the same time, we don't want to restrict all kids if it's not something their parents want. So how do we find that balance?
Yep, and it's good to work through a test case. You know, I think it's very important
Yeah.
too. But, okay, well, thank you for the detail. And sorry, Bobby, I know you're waiting to get to your thing. Holding you here.
Calling her out. Wow.
Should have moved her up in the agenda too.
All right, so the Reconsideration Committee does require a motion and a second to adopt the committee.
I'll move to adopt the Reconsideration Committee appointments as presented, or do I need to read them, Ted? I'm fine. All right, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adopt the Reconsideration Committee appointments as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Wrestling mat purchase. This does require a motion and a second for us to take action on it.
So I'm going to have Mr. Weber come up and talk us through this one.
I think the quote is self-explanatory, and I have the actual design we could also throw up there if I need to email it, but the biggest reason behind this is for anyone that's been to any of our larger wrestling stuff here, you know, our 3 mats are too big, so it's kind of a triangle, so you can only really pull out one section, which works fine for our quads and our duals and all that. It does not work out well for like Rich Gray. If you've ever come to it, it's completely packed wall to wall. And we've even talked about using the wrestling room as an additional space during that tournament, and that's not completely off the table. But I also, in coming to this district, wanted to start hosting more items across the board. Wrestling's been the first one I've been able to jump on with other schools. I know we're new to the West Central Conference, so I've made some deals with ADs to move us up in the pecking order since I know we just joined it. Wrestling's one of the first ones, and so we created next year a middle school wrestling championship that we would be hosting every single year unless someone else really wants to do it. That would actually be the night before Rich Gray, and there again we would need more space to have both of those stands pulled out. And then the future of wrestling in Iowa, I'm very confident, it will be announced soon, but that will be moving to districts instead of sectionals and districts. And so if you only have 6 districts across the state, you're going to need to be able to host 20 to 24, 26 teams that day. And we would not be able to put in to host those events if we didn't have that seating. So this was something that Coach Swim and I had talked about earlier in the fall. It was more of kind of a want at that point, and I'm not saying it's not completely a want now, but if we want to host those bigger events and we want to get on the schedule next year right away, it came more of a need. With it, made it a little bit easier that Mac Club was footing the bill for it. But so they designed it, set it all up, got the bids, and kind of ready to move forward based on how all this goes. So happy to answer any questions that relate to all that.
So the Mat Club's paying for the entire thing?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
So that's already been deposited and is just sitting waiting there to be used. So.
And the designs have been reviewed and measurements, and you feel good about?
Yep. We have a
everything
couple feet.
quoted.
If you think about how when you're at a basketball game, both stands are pulled out. If you're sitting on our home side, the mats stream completely from left to right, wall to wall underneath the home and away baskets, if you think about it that way. So instead of being a triangle, they butt up section by section by section. They can be taken apart because of the way they interlock. So you could have just one if you wanted. I'm not sure we would ever do that. There are probably plenty of times we would only use two though. But then there's also a chance where you'd have all three for the bigger competitions. So.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Weber on the mat purchase? Not hearing any, we would need a motion and a second to take action.
I'd move that we approve the wrestling mat purchase as presented, and thanks to the Mat Club.
I'd second that we approve the wrestling mat purchase.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the wrestling mats as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And thank you to the Mat Club. Next.
So continuing with our plan to, continue to maintain our facilities, we are in another phase of our roof project, and this is our area over the district office, ICN room, all the math rooms, and then the east and west corridor of the high school. And so this was broken down into two phases. And we have bids from Academy Roofing and from Bailey, and both of them have done work with us before. Surprisingly, and I'm leery of saying this on camera, but they were under budget. And and I'll pull up the bid here from Academy, because that's the one that Mr. Gray would like us to approve. But you can see there the two different areas. The north area of that roof and then the south area of the roof is $146,800 for the north area and $132,950 for the south area. So it's a $279, $750, sorry, for that project or that bid. The Bailey was about $476,000 for the bid. So the recommendation is that we actually do both projects. We do have that money in our Save and Pepple currently, so that the funding for it is available this year. And that includes all of our current Save and Pepple expenditures, plus including, our text or our computer purchases. All that's factored in, and we'll still have some extra in that fund. So that's why I would recommend that we do both the north and the south roof area with this bid.
Sharon, I know a couple years ago we had quite a few talks about how there was a large section of roofs throughout the school that had been neglected. And we've done several projects throughout the past. Where does this get us? Does this get us pretty much caught up, so now we're on a cycle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think we'll probably actually be ahead of the game because, and I don't know if you can be ahead of the roof game, but yes, we will. This was the one that we were sitting back and dreading. We actually had saved money in Save and Pepple last year to help offset the costs for this. And so when they came in a little under budget, it was a relief considering some of the other projects we've had bid.
So if no unforeseen circumstances, we probably will not have to be spending money on roofs next year?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
I want to knock on something, but yes.
Understood. All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? I would need a motion and a second to approve the bid.
I'd move we approve the replacement roof bid approval as presented. Wow, that was terrible.
I will second that terrible motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the, both bids as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? And Ted, did you get that motion?
I got it, yes.
Okay. All right, that moves us to the bus routing software, and she's already up and moving.
So I'll give a little background on this, and Bobby will give us a lot more background. We've had a trying year in our transportation, not through anything that Mrs. Finley has done, but because we've had some illnesses and we've had not everyone hired. And so we've had a lot of shifting of routes and a lot of unforeseen issues come up that we had not anticipated. And I anticipate, and I think Mrs. Finley is in agreement, that this is not something that's going to change overnight. We will continue to have challenges. We simply are not seeing as many people apply to be bus drivers. And our bus driving population is getting older.
Yep.
And so we're running into the same challenges that many districts across the state and across the country are facing. And so we're trying to be proactive. And so I'm going to let Mrs. Finley talk a little bit about what she's been working on with Dania and conversations we've had.
So, with the driver shortage and illnesses, not enough substitutes, we started looking into routing software. One that would preferably be able to help us on the fly, that if we were short a driver, we could overlay it onto the map, combined in 2 or 3 different spots, hit a button and go. It would give drivers who jump into those roles, they would have a tablet in their bus and would be able to hit like a sandbox route, and then it would take them turn by turn. That would be awesome for substitute drivers especially, instead of trying to take them out, teach them a route, and sometimes we don't have that luxury. We get them to the first person and we say, just ask them, they'll help you. And 9 times out of 10 they will, but what if it's that little preschooler you pick up first? So, I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons to all this. I know Norwalk, I don't know, it's been maybe 10 years ago, they put in the TransFinder routing system. It didn't compute well, and they had a lot of kids dropped off at the wrong spots. I know that's in the back of everybody's heads. It happens, but I'm hoping that we can get it into our system, into their database, to work out all those kinks before we put it into play. We went over and we looked at Traversa over at Norwalk, which is the Tyler Technologies. It's a nice system. Do I think it's worth $60,000? No. I think that's kind of far-fetched. Talk to Busright. They're a new company. They have been really open, telling me, no, we don't have that yet, but we're working on it. At this time, I don't think they're the right fit for us, because they don't have a lot of the forms that we could use later on down the line when we get used to the system. But they're working on it. So, I mean, they're a good group of young men that are trying to get a business going and have been very successful at it so far, but it just makes you wonder how long they'll be at it or if they decide to give it up. But Dania and I really liked the Transact / App Garden. Creston has just gotten it and are trying to get all of their input, all their data inputted into the system right now, and he says it's going really well. Talked to Robin Picard up at West Des Moines. They actually just got the system purchased in March and are almost ready to completely roll it out. They've got their activity trips built on it right now and are hoping by the end of May, they'll have all their routes and everything inputted into the system. App Garden, she said, has been really good about working with them. It has a lot of like split family calendar options we can use, route layover. They have a parent app, it's all cloud-based. We can have as many users as we want. Secretaries can be trained, teachers can be trained, bus drivers can be trained. That way, when a teacher wants to know something about a student on what their stops are in the afternoon, they either call me or they call the office. Right now, with this system, if we was to go to this, they would go into the system and they would just be able to look. They wouldn't be able to change nothing, but they would be able to check to see where that student is going in the afternoon instead of tying somebody else up to do it. It's unlimited support and training, as I said. Bus routes can be viewed by the teachers in the office. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, student attendance. That's been a big concern. And BusRite did have that too, but they only use a QR code. But we do a lot of combining last minute. I'll take notes up to the office, say, sorry guys, but I'm down a driver. So I'm in my office trying to fluctuate to make sure I get the right kids on the right bus, and I have made mistakes, but we've gotten them to where they need to go. But with this QR code or a barcode, whichever we would decide to use, if we had to combine routes, we could hit that on on our tablet to say Sandbox Route 1, then it would show up all the kids that would be on that Sandbox Route 1 if I would have to combine. That way we knew we got all the kids on the right bus. So if a kid got on there and scanned and they didn't belong on that one, we could figure out before we left where they went to. It's a big safety feature that a lot of the schools are going to. You know when they get on, you know when they get off by scanning their code or their QR code. You have any questions?
So this is I'm surprised we haven't had something like this before. I mean, right? Because you've been doing all the...
I've been doing it.
Yeah,
and
that's
this
impressive.
makes me nervous because I'm afraid of messing it up.
Well, no, that's impressive. I'm just saying I couldn't keep it all in my head. And when my wife says, well, you're going to pick up the kids today but not tomorrow, I'm like, that's all you have to do is text the bus drivers? I'm like, seems like I'd get lost. So this allows parents to basically know where their kid is at.
Yep.
And
with
so
the
they can
parent
see
app, yes, they could. So my first goal is to get the route stuff done first.
Yeah.
And then the parent app would be next. But with the parent app, we should be able to do less calling of parents. We could push it all out on the app.
Right.
This is going to be your pickup time. This will be your driver. This will be your bus number. And this will be your drop-off time.
And so even if we change the routes that day, an alert will go out, or a
Yes.
notification will go
Yep.
out and say your new bus pickup time is
Yes.
7:43 instead of 7:22. Wow, okay. That's cool. I don't think I have. Will it be in place for next year? I know you said the ones that we're implementing in March were almost
Right.
done.
I hope to.
Okay.
I would hope that we could, but this is all new to me, so
Yeah.
I would say we could
It-
with our number of students within the district.
Yeah. I'm just hoping you can maybe push the company to help you
Well,
get there.
and
right?
they've been,
If they're good. to
Andrew's
work
worked
with.
really well with me. I called him actually Saturday, and I actually emailed him Saturday because I had a ton more questions, and I didn't want to put the proposal in until I got my questions answered. So they have worked with us really well, so has
Good.
Bus Right. But like I said, I think this is the way for us to go.
Yep.
I did put on there that the barcode scanner would be at an added cost.
Yep.
Also, the hardware to mount it in the bus, to charge it, and all of that, we would have to pay for as well through a different company, but they'll help us locate one. And when I talked to Bob Beatty, he said it run him about $300 to $350 per bus.
Per
For all
bus.
that hardware and stuff.
Is it? That
Yeah.
doesn't seem like much for the safety of knowing your kid got on the bus and got off the bus and the right bus and everything else.
Right.
But
Right.
I shouldn't say, it doesn't seem like okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I guess, yeah, this specific one is very subscription, yearly fee based, a little bit.
They all
push
are.
it more per yearly fee, very little upfront cost or the one-time cost. When I say very little, it's little compared to the yearly cost.
Right.
As far as our existing transportation budget, is that where we're proposing this would come out of? Is there any concerns about that?
Yes and no. I mean, we've had
Sharon saying no.
very few major breakdowns with buses because we're keeping our buses rotated. I think between Joel and I, with not outsourcing so much, has saved the district a lot of money as well. So,
Okay.
Yes, this is coming out of transportation, we have plenty of money in there for it.
And no
Easy
concern,
enough,
no
right.
concerns about 5 years from now or
No.
being able, okay.
No, because if you remember, about 3 years ago, we have a transportation equity fund that is supposed to offset some of this work that districts have, with larger districts.
Right.
And so that we get $300,000 in that fund, and so some of that will go to this.
And those last two buses, we got at a discount too, right?
yes,
By-
we got a
Because she wrote
grant
a grant.
for
Is that for
the
two
last
buses?
two buses,
Yes.
and the second bus is out at the bus shed.
Just
We
came
got it
last
the other
week.
day.
Yep.
I saw the invoice in the bills. Hard to
So
miss that
next
one.
year, they're coming out with more grants again. Their big focus right now is electric. I am waiting for them to come out for diesels. I believe we have enough propane right now I'm unsure on really what the propane life is going to be. So we've now got 6 propane altogether in our fleet that we run daily. So we're saving quite a big chunk there as far as fuel costs and oil and maintenance and, because it's unbelievable what we use for oil in a propane compared to what we put in the diesel. So we've cut down routine maintenance on our buses over the last 2 years. 3 years, 4 years. Plus, we also got the discount back from the state or the federal government for using propane as well, so.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Bobby, I sit there at the bus stop at the park pretty much every morning.
Yep,
And some days you may have 9 kids get on there, some days you may have 2.
right,
And I'm aware of one young man who has missed before and doesn't know how he's gonna get to school. And, I've talked to him and and Jack's talked to him, but this would allow his parents to know exactly what's going on in the morning.
correct.
Because he doesn't live right by the bus stop, so he's gotta walk a ways. I get
Right.
that. And so I'm all in favor of something like this. And if it can make your life easier, I hope it does.
That is my goal, is to make it easier for everybody.
But I think the more information is better.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, is there any other questions? This requires a motion and a second to approve the proposal as presented.
I'd move to approve the bus routing software as recommended by Mrs. Finley.
I'll second Roger's motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the bus routing software as recommended. All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the agenda.
Steve, I don't know if you said this, and I apologize if you did. What time do you want board members here for graduation? 1:40-ish? Yeah, okay.
No, I figured it was on our sheet that
I was going to say, according to this sheet, you have a mandatory graduation practice, Eddie.
The seniors don't need to know when we show up. Yes. All right, so the next meeting is scheduled for May 23rd, 6 p.m. And the reminder is graduation is May 22nd at 2 p.m. I do need a motion and a second to adjourn.
I'll make a motion. Okay, no, go ahead. I'll second his motion.
Properly moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.